Welcome back, coders. This is the project video for doing the fourth game in our Mission to Mars project. So let's get started. You want to make sure you've done the videos before this one so that your project is ready to go. So go ahead and open up Mission to Mars. We're going to add the code for button 4. Okay, so for button 4, let's first thing we need to do is create an event for when this sprite is clicked. So we want a couple things to happen. Under events, let's broadcast clear everything, and then we're going to do a new broadcast called start game 4. We could give these different names. We're just going to go with numbers because they match the buttons here. So when we click on button 4, all of the sprites in the game are going to disappear. And then all of the ones that are programmed to respond to start game 4 will do what they're supposed to do. First thing we want to do is our backdrop. Our backdrop is going to be pretty easy. It's going to be the same starry background as game 3. So let's just control click or right click on this one to duplicate it. And when I receive start game 4, switch back to the stars. So if we run this and click button 4, we just get that starry background that we would expect to see for the beginning of game 4. So let's talk about game 4 for a second. Game 4, so we've filled the rocket, we've launched the rocket, we've avoided the rocks. Now our rocket needs to arrive safely at Mars. So we're going to want two sprites for this one. One is the rocket and the other is the planet of Mars. So let's do the planet Mars first. So we're going to draw this one. Scratch doesn't really have a nice looking red planet, so we're going to make our own. And we're going to leave it as a vector. So when it says convert to bitmap, we're just going to leave that the way it is. Click the circle, and we want a nice looking circle right around the center of the sprite. Okay, let's fill that with a red color. And we don't need an outline there. It's fine because it's got a black background, so black outline will be just fine. Let's do our code. So we need to start with this one. When I receive clear everything, we want to hide it. So come to looks and do hide. And then grab the show one too, because we're going to use that in the very next block. When I receive clear everything, hide. And when I receive start game 4, that's when we want it to show. Okay, so when we run the green flag, click on the 4. There's our planet Mars. We don't want the planet Mars to be in the same spot because one of the things scientists need to do when you're flying through space is to be able to make course adjustments as you go. Maybe there's an obstacle in the way you weren't expecting, or your calculations were just a bit off. And so our rocket needs to make some adjustments, and the player is going to determine what those adjustments are, but Mars could be anywhere for the purpose of our game. So we want, when the start game 4 broadcast occurs, for the planet Mars to appear somewhere on the screen. That's going to be a motion, and we're going to not just go to random, and I'll explain that in a second. Grab this one, go to XY, and bring it over. The reason why I don't want to just do a random position is because with this program, this bottom section of the screen is going to be covered up with some other things that are happening in the program. So we only want X to appear. Well, the X can be anywhere across from left to right, but we only want the Y to become till about between here and here. So we don't want to be down in this area. So we're going to use two random statements. Click on operators, bring over this one, put that in the X, bring over another one, put that in the Y, and let's change these values. So for X, it could be anywhere from about -230 over to about 230, so let's put that in here for the X. And then for Y, we want to only go about this low, which is -65, up to the highest, which we could say is about, well, let's do 165 as well. So now every time this code here runs, Mars will jump around on the screen for its starting position, but it won't ever be down here in the bottom of the screen. And you'll see why that's important later. Okay, that's all that Mars needs to do. Now let's add in our rocket. Oh, hold on a second. Let's let's rename this. See how this says sprite 1? That's not very helpful. So let's call this Game for Mars. Now let's add the rocket. And here's the same old rocket we've seen lots of times before. And let's, alright, let's shrink this down a little bit to a 30 again. Maybe even smaller. Okay, we're going to have the rocket, when every time this game starts, we want it to start in the middle of the screen. Okay, because we know where the rocket's going to be. Maybe Mars is off, not where we're expecting it. And so, but we always know where the rocket's going to be. So let's have the rocket be in the middle of the screen every time. We also need to add the default broadcast code onto this one too. So come to rocket ship. Let's rename it. This is the Game for Rocket. And come over here to the code. Under this one, we need 2 blocks of code for like the same as everything else. When I receive. One of these we want to hide. One of these we want to show. And then on this one, we're going to set this to start game 4. Just like the planet Mars now, when we click on the 4, the rocket and the planet will show up. Now, if we move if we move that rocket, it'll stay where we put it. So we need to change that. When we receive start game 4, we also want the motion code block that says go to 0, 0 to be there. So now every time we run this 4, the rocket will appear in the center of the screen. Okay. So the rocket looks good and Mars looks good. There's a problem with the rocket sprite we'll see in a second, but basically our program is going to ask the player to input a direction and a distance for the rocket to travel to try to arrive on the planet, to arrive at the planet. So because we're going to have it turn directions, we want it to always point in the right direction at the beginning. We want it to be just like it starts in the middle. We always want it to be facing the right direction each time too. So that'll be pointing direction 0. And then what we're going to do is we want a loop for this one, but not a forever loop, because like I said in a previous video, you usually don't want a loop that goes on forever and ever and ever, as parts of the program are going to end and then start up again. So let's do something new this time. Under control, let's repeat until, and let's do a sensor thing in here. So we're going to repeat it until, come to sensing, until it's touching the Mars, which we're going to call here, remember Mars is, what do we call that one? Game for Mars. Where's that one? Game, we're off the bottom of the screen. Game for Mars. Okay, I had to scroll up my code there for a second so you could see it. Okay, so basically we're going to run this loop over and over and over and over and over again until the rocket ends up touching the planet Mars. Because once it's arrived at the planet Mars, then we don't need to do our loop anymore, and the player has won this part of the game. Okay, so let's do this a little thing too, so we know. I'm going to put a block here that says success for 2 seconds after it's touching the game Mars. So if we run this code right now, it'll say success, because where the planet Mars is right there, it's actually touching it. If we move Mars and run it again, this is going to stay highlighted forever because it's repeating, repeating, and repeating, and repeating until it's touching Mars. It's never touching Mars. Now if we were to move the rocket closer to Mars, as soon as it touches it, it says success for 2 seconds, and then that block of code ends. So that's what we want the player to do, is figure out how to get the rocket to the planet. But the planet's going to be in a different spot every time we play it. So here's what we want. Under sensing, we're going to ask 2 questions. We're going to ask, turn what? And we're going to ask, how far? And each of those. So when this runs, you'll see the rocket will ask turn what, and the player has to type in a number here. And because this block is showing up on the screen, that's why I didn't want Mars to be down here, because then the question would be covering up the sprite, and we didn't want that. Okay, so the player's going to have to type in a number and a distance, and then it asks for a number and a distance and a number and a distance. And right now it doesn't do anything, but that's what we want it to do. Is it's going to ask those two questions, and then based on what the player types in, it's going to turn and then move. All right, so how do we make it turn and move based on what the player says? So come under motion, and we're going to make ours turn right every time. And then we could do it this way, just with the word move. I'm going to change this in a second, but I want you to see what this does first of all. Okay, so now this isn't going to be very helpful, because if I run this code, it's going to ask me to turn what, and I could say 0, go 1,000, and it's always going to turn 15 and then move 10. Even though I type in turn 90 and move 1, it's always going to turn 15 and move 10, turn 15 and move 10. What we need to do is replace these two numbers here with whatever the player typed in as their answer. If you come to sensing, down here under the ask and wait block is a variable loop or oval. It says answer. So if you drag answer over here into both of these spots, then that should fix our code. And you'll notice these two numbers will be different, because in between when we use them, we ask a new question. So if it says turn what, and I say 90, it'll now turn 90, but then it'll ask again how far, and if I say 100, then it'll move 100. So let's try that. 90 and 100, and that did a big old jump. Okay, something interesting is happening here though, and that's why I wanted to change this. Instead of moving answer steps, I want to move one step, but come under control and repeat that answer times. So now if I say 10, it's going to repeat 10 times, moving one step. And if I say 20, then it'll repeat that 20 times, move one step. So it'll look a little bit different. Let's say I want to turn negative 90 and then move 50. Now it'll brrr. Now you should notice something weird there. Do you see how the rocket is turning and moving, but when it moves sideways instead of forward? That's because our costume is pointed in the wrong direction. Come to the rocket's costume. Let's get rid of all of these ones that we're not going to use. And on rocket ship A, click on your arrow, highlight it, and what we need to do is actually rotate this so that it's pointing to the same direction that the sprite thinks is the front, which is going to be over here. So now, come back to code, let's stop it, run the green flag, click on the 4, and if I say turn 45, turns 45, and if I move 100, it should go straight forward. Alright, boys and girls, our project is about done. Let's turn 5 more and move 100 more. And it'll keep asking the player to turn and move, turn and move, turn and move until it arrives at the planet. Alright, that is the point of the game. Let's try it a few more times. Number 4. Turn, I'm not going to turn it all there, but let's go 120. And we got lucky on that one. And let's try it one more time. Number 4. Oh, that's just silly. Let's turn 0 and move 50. Oh, our rocket still landed on it because part of it is touching it. Okay. Oh, let me pause. So what happened on my screen just then is actually a good thing to talk about. I got a message on my screen saying that my browser couldn't connect to Scratch anymore. And if you clicked on the button to try again, eventually you just got a message saying, oops, that file can't be found. What ended up happening was that I got accidentally logged out of Scratch for some reason. So fortunately, before I lost the page, I came over here to File, and I hit Save to Your Computer. And so hopefully that made a good copy of it. I haven't loaded it yet. Let's see what happens. I'm not going to save it again. Now I'm going to load from my computer to see this file here. Replace that with my newer, or with the version that was saved. Let's see what happens now when we run it again. So we're going to hit the green flag, check number 4, turn, that looks like about 60 degrees. I turned a little bit too far. Let's move 140. And then let's go negative 30 degrees and then just move, I don't know, 20. Okay, so now on this Game 4 rocket, we need to add some code here, right? Under this Game 4 rocket, we need to broadcast, clear everything, broadcast, go to main screen, and that should reset the game after you beat Game 4. So let's try Game 4 again. We're going to turn this negative 40. We're going to move 190. Let's see where that ends up. We're going to go negative 90. Let's go 110. So now's a good time to talk about a way to make this game more creative to match your style. Can you think of how you might want the rocket to go more quickly, right? Or maybe you want to draw a line on the screen everywhere it goes using the pen tool. There's a lot of ways you could customize this kind of a project and make it your own. All right, so there it says success, and then it takes us back to the beginning because we cleared everything and we went to the main screen. That's the end of that's the end of this video. We hope that was a fun one for you. I'm gonna go drink some water and then we'll start the next one.